So 25.
That's 25, yeah. So they never have, so I don't know if they're good, but go ahead and take one, this one, they look like. Yep, they're good. Would you like to try a cake? Yep, thank you. Yes, you're welcome. We'll just set it up. They don't want to tell you, grab one. And I have popcorn, since I can't touch it.
Okay.
Need more chairs.
Yes, I'm not sure exactly how that works. Oh, here we go.
Yeah.
It's okay, I'll just,
Yeah, I'm not.
Rob was asking.
Hello,
Hey, Gordon.
hey there, morning.
Can't see you yet. You didn't find any more?
No, I've been told if we need more, I'm supposed to ask you to go get it.
So I'm on,
What?
I
I can hear you, but not see.
like that, I wonder, I don't know, oh, there you go.
All right. There we go.
Anyone see?
Gotcha. Nope.
Yep, someone is, never mind.
Oh. You there?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay. Little frozen, but it'll be all right. There we go. Now we're good. All right. I'm gonna wait like 1 or 2 minutes to see all trickles in, and then we'll start. Large drink container.
Sounds good.
And guys, just to introduce you, this is Gordon Marino. He is the former head of the Hong International Kierkegaard Library at St. Olaf. He is one of the world's best scholars in Kierkegaard in English, and also the director of the summer fellowships that I was a part of about 10 years ago. Yeah,
That long?
yeah, I think so. I think it was like 2000. Actually, it's more than that. It's like 15.
Time is a jet plane, man. Oof.
Yeah, it is. But he's gonna speak to us today, just about as an introductory, who Kierkegaard was, and what his teachings are about, and also a little bit about how Kierkegaard impacted his life. So it is 10:45. I said we'd start on the dot, and I'm gonna close the door. So, Gordon Marino.
We got more.
Thank you. How do I expand this page? Okay. Oh, I can't see
Oh,
everybody.
wait, by the way, real quick, when we do the question stuff, this should automatically go to whoever it's going to be talking. So we got a little tech piece. So just so you
Yeah,
know,
I'm
that's what it's doing.
Okay, I'm just trying to widen this out a little bit, my screen here.
Yeah.
There we go. Well, good morning from the battlefield of Minneapolis right now. And thanks for the introduction, Seth, and for Elisa for helping to set up this conversation. And glad to be with you. And so we're going to talk about Søren Kierkegaard, 1813 to 1855, born and raised in Copenhagen, right? And often regarded as the first existentialist, or I'll explain that a little bit later. But I was born in a wealthy family, nouveau riche family. His father came from Jutland and was a shepherd boy and became very wealthy when he came to Copenhagen. And he had Søren's father was 56 when he had him, and his mother 45, which was pretty unusual back in those days, right? I mean, really, really unusual. And he had 4 siblings, and he was the youngest of 6 kids, and 4 of his siblings had died before he was 20. His father died, his mother died, so made a lot of trips to the Kierkegaard, the churchyard, so very, very he wrote in pseudonyms. He didn't write all. He wrote a good part of the authorship for which he's famous, his most famous books, in pseudonyms. And then he had another authorship which he wrote in his own name, edifying, kind of upbuilding discourses and that kind of thing. So, there's a lot of discussion among Kierkegaard scholars as to how to understand the pseudonyms. And so if I were going to recommend one of his books, it would be Sickness Under Death, but it's written by Anti-Climacus, right? And another book, Concept of Anxiety, written by Vigilius Hoffniensis. Right, and one way to understand the pseudonyms is to think of them as each as providing a different perspective on life. So Anticlimacus is his dogmatic pseudonym. Vigilius Hoffniensis is his is a psychologist, right? So it's a lot of battling over the meaning of the pseudonyms. So I'm just going to run through some of Kierkegaard's greatest hits, epiphanies, okay? To try to his whole life was a meditation on the meaning of faith, right? He really struggled against the idea that you could be born a Christian, and the Danish state church, if you're born in Denmark, you're automatically a Christian, a Lutheran. Kierkegaard struggled against that. He was it's as though he was trying to make faith possible again by showing it in all its how hard it is, right? So I think ultimately for him it was to try to follow in Christ's footsteps. I mean, and so much so that he really believed that if you were getting patted on the back and by society, you were probably going in the wrong direction, right? So he thought Christian faith was very revolutionary, very rigorous, and not something that would be most people would like. And so again, he was very adamant about that. Now, I'm sure you've heard this phrase, the leap of faith, right? And it's one attributed to Kierkegaard. And one scholar, using the computer figured out that he never actually used that phrase in its entirety, right? It's certainly what he meant by faith, but he never used the phrase itself. But okay, so the idea there was that you can't get to faith on a ladder of syllogisms or on empirical evidence like the cosmological argument. God must exist because the universe is ordered, that kind of thing. No, for him there was always this gap between the kind of reasons, objective kinds of reasons, and faith in the Lord. And so I've always understood him as thinking of faith as akin to trust. The Danish word is tro, and it's as a trust, not as you would trust in a person, right? Right, almost as a trusting in a person as opposed to a kind of a certainty. In fact, in the Concluding on Scientific Postscript, which was his most philosophical work, he stated in many different ways that where there's certainty, there's no faith. Where there's no risk, there's no faith, right? So that was an important insight claim on his part. And in fact, one of the things that attracted me to him on the faith issue was his acknowledging the elephant in the room, that it was pretty hard to believe that there's a God up there watching out over each of our personal lives and that kind of thing. That's in that sense, I think if someone said you got to be crazy to believe, he'd understand where they were coming from, right? So this collision between reason and faith is important, right? And so faith is a kind of trust like you would in a person. And the feeling, he viewed the feelings about faith come and go. I mean, he wrote a lot about moods, as we'll get to, and that sometimes you feel the Spirit, then you don't. But there's more to faith in that feeling, right? But some of his the contributions he's perhaps most noted for are his depth psychology. Right? In some ways, on many different issues, he really is a Freud with the religious categories up his sleeves. Right. So let's talk a little bit about that. For example, think of anxiety. Okay, we've medicalized most emotions today, but certainly anxiety, where anxiety is regarded as a symptom, as something getting in the way of functioning, something to get rid of, right? And Kierkegaard anticipated anxiety being treated with what he's called pills and powders. He anticipated the medicalization of anxiety, but he thought rather than seeing it as a symptom, he thought that anxiety was a sign that we're spirits, because in the sense that it's in anxiety that we appropriate the fact that we're free creatures that have to make choices, right? So just imagine some of the ethical dilemmas if we're awake enough, we can see every day, and how difficult it is to decide what's the right thing to do when you can't just reason it out or calculate it in some way, right? So we have this enormous responsibility for him to try to trust in the Lord, and also to be righteous, do the right thing. But we can't just churn our choices out vis-a-vis reason. So anxiety is this awareness of possibility of freedom, and he also recognizes that it can go very, very badly, that it could lead to suicide. He says in the last chapter of his book, The Concept of Anxiety. So he's very unusual in his decision to take the moods and emotions so seriously, to reflect on them as he did. I think he's really quite extraordinary in that regard. But in the final chapter of his book, The Concept of Anxiety, Haftiensis, Kierkegaard, says that to learn how to be anxious in the right way is to learn the ultimate lesson in life. Can you imagine telling that to your therapist, that anxiety is really a good thing, and we need to learn to be anxious in the right way. And I think by that he meant my reading of him is, to some extent, it's really a matter of what's your anxiety. To be anxious in the right way is to be anxious about the right things, about what kind of human being you are. So we have all these anxieties about, as a professor, I've seen anxieties about, what kind of job you're going to have, all these worldly things. But, and he understood that it was certainly appropriate and fine to worry about some of those things. But the most important thing is that you worry about what kind of human being you are, And that's a secularizer. For him, it would be to worry about your relationship to God. That was certainly, but to present a more, these days you have to present a secularized version of it, but it's to worry about what kind of human being am I becoming, which is something I just know as a professor. In the parentheses, that is your 4 years in undergraduate college or whatever, you're not invited enough to think about that question. It's always about what you're going to do afterwards, right? Not what you're going to be. And so the really important to kind of take in stock, to think about what kind of human being am I becoming? What kind of human being am I? That's the right thing to be. And that anxiety about that ought to, I hate to use the word, trump everything. But so that's an important contribution of this, and very important in the whole existential tradition, Camus, Sartre, etc. Okay? So anxiety is a positive thing. It's a sign that we're spirits, and the person who says they lack anxiety, well, that's just a sign that they're spiritless. Okay, and so to continue with Kierkegaard as therapist, let's think about the distinction, at least I've drawn out of him, between depression and despair. Right? Depression and despair. He, which we've collapsed, right? Today, if you tell someone you're in despair, they'd say to get to some online counseling or something, go to get some help, somebody to talk to. So we treat it as a psychological disorder, and we don't tend to acknowledge the distinction between the spiritual and the psychological problem, malady, right? And we tend to collapse the two. So for him, and he certainly classified himself as a depressive his whole life. He said depression was his best friend, and oftentimes he would say he would write at one point he wrote, my father made me depressed, ruined my chances for happiness, but I'm eternally grateful to him because he prepared me for faith." But can you imagine that, thanking your parents for making you miserable, which is what he did, right? So depression for him is a mood, right? And it's something he suffers, like internal weather, right? And by the same token, he thought that happiness wasn't the ultimate aim in life, and that happiness was really a matter of kind of a fortune. You ever meet happy-go-lucky people? I used to have this neighbor down the street. I used to call him, not to his face, but the happy wanderer. I couldn't stand him. He's always cheerful. I mean, authentically. I'm serious, man. I even asked around, is that guy? What's that guy? Really irritating. And it wasn't like a fake. I mean, it wasn't a fake cheerfulness. He just put together that way, And so Kierkegaard thought that happiness was that kind of pleasant life, whatever, was really a matter of fortune, not something you earned, not something. Whereas what he calls whereas earnestness, which is the opposite of, whereas this despair, he thought, was an activity of the self, right? And it's this in which one loses oneself, one gives up oneself, he ultimately classifies it as, calls it sin, despair is sin, but it's a spiritual state. It's an activity, right? And so someone who didn't take who was really, was like my guy down the street who happened to be a Lutheran, very faithful Lutheran, but someone who didn't worry or concern themselves with their spiritual lives or what kind of human beings they were, just kind of went along. They'd be in despair, as on his account, right? And so the despair is this. So, and he claimed that happiness was despair's greatest hiding place. How's that for a negative? Happiness is despair's greatest hiding place. Why? Because when you get no green lights, when everything's going your way, it's you're not, and especially if you're a privileged person, maybe rich, powerful, whatever, there's not much of an inclination towards self-examination, towards thinking about things like what kind of human being am I becoming? What's my relationship to God? Right? It becomes, in that sense, to be fortunate is to be spiritually unfortunate, right? Because the person who's having a rough time is probably more likely to think about what kind of human beings they are, to introspect, reflect, than the person for whom everything's going fine, right? So he thought so despair is this spiritual problem, depression, a psychological one, and he certainly he believed that on his own account that you could be depressed and melancholic and still not be in despair. He saw himself that way, right? Whereas you can't be depressed and be happy. You can be despair and be miserable and be miserable, melancholic, right? So I think that's a distinction that's been effaced in our society. That is between spiritual and psychological disorders. Okay. Hit number 3. His emphasis on appropriation or inwardness. He believed that people had stopped they don't think about how they're taking something inwardly, how they're appropriating it, right? Their relation. This comes up in what I think is one of the first moves in existentialism. In the postscript, he frequently talks about the importance of our awareness of our own mortality, of death. And at one point in the postscript, he writes this almost 2-page sentence delineating all the objective facts about death, right? All the objective facts. And at the end, he says, none of these facts tell me what death means to me, right? How to appropriate it. What's its meaning for me, right? And he thinks people had forgotten that. They didn't want to do the work of appropriating something inwardly. One of the examples I often use is I was the student of a very famous Freud scholar, and at one point, and as a grad student, he really dressed me, and he really gave it to me, really very powerful critique. And afterwards, at the end, I said, "Yeah, I agree, Professor, I agree." He says, "You couldn't possibly agree. You haven't thought about it for a minute. That's resistance, right? You haven't thought about what I said for a minute. You didn't even." So this recognition of the need to think about what to appropriate the meaning of things for yourself. So think about, and we live in this slogan world, right? The slogan-filled world. I mean, every day, quotes on Twitter all day, bumper stickers, and we never think, well, do I really believe that love is all important? We have all these slogans, and he says there's just people don't do any of that inward work of appropriating what various ideas mean to us, right? And that was a really important emphasis in his book. He thinks they've forgotten the whole. He said people want books that they can read during their nap, right? So, boy, I think more than ever he'd be concerned about that in our present social media lives. So that's an important contribution. Let me see. I think so to think about, do I really believe what I'm saying? Do I really mean it? Right? Would be quite a bracing challenge to put to yourself. What else? One of the oh yeah, okay. So how about this one? He says that I think for Kierkegaard, one of the the greatest impediments to leading a moral life is our obsession with comparison. Just obsession with comparison, right? Which he jokes we take right into the graveyard, where one person has a big plot with a iron chain link fence around it, and the other is just a little small cross. That we're constantly comparing ourselves to others. That is real, just a fixed idea, and which leads to envy and animosity and that kind of thing. And he just saw that everywhere, right? So I mean, I've had students who applying to grad school, and they get in and they'll ask me, "Hey doc, how many people do you think got rejected?" I say, "Nobody." Just to tease them. Nobody else got rejected. Right? Because they were just measuring themselves. Got to measure yourselves, and very common in academia. I once told not long ago told a colleague, "Oh, there's this new book out." Person said, "Oh, damn it, that's my book. I wanted to write that book." So this constant comparison that we're locked into is recognized as an impediment to leading a loving life. And Well, there's another book you should read, Works of Love. That's written in his own. Seth, you've enjoyed that book, right? That's meant something.
But
Yeah,
probably my favorite by a
yeah,
lot.
yeah, yeah. It is. It's very, very powerful. Very, very demanding in the sense that he portrays love as a duty, a need, a feeling, the everything, and very, very, very much aimed at rooting out a selfish kind of narcissistic self-love from proper self-concern. But when he thinks of love as a duty to, with regard to our neighbors, he says we have the duty to presuppose love in others. Right? That's part of what it means to love in a Christian sense is to presuppose. And I imagine that like somebody you really don't don't much like. eh, you you know the duty there is to presuppose. I think in some sense their ultimate goodness that loves within them, right? And that's I think really powerful insight into what it means to love our neighbors and very very hard, So so okay, I'm trying if there's walking with this dude for 40 years now, I guess. I'm just trying to isolate just a couple of truths that have meant something to me. Another one was this weird idea that one of the greatest flaws that human beings have is this tendency towards procrastination, which I always thought of as an academic in terms of writing papers or, like putting off writing a paper or putting off, some kind of writing exercise. And no, he sees its spiritual significance, right? That when we're faced with the difficult decisions, we have a tendency to a decision that runs contrary to our long and or short-term interests. We tend to say, well, I'll sleep on this. It's too important an issue. All right. I remember as I've written about this, but I was up for a Fulbright back in the 80s when we were at war with, we were supporting the Contras and we were committing massacres in Nicaragua, and I was going to tax resist. And then someone informed me that, hey, if you tax resist, don't plan on getting a Fulbright, right? Don't plan on going to Denmark anytime soon if you're going to tax resist. So yeah, I thought I better think on this, and ultimately came to the conclusion, well, I'll start tax resistant when I become when I when I get some firm station in life, right? Become a professor or whatever, right? So I put off the decision, and naturally, he says when you do that, you end up the easy thing becomes the right thing to do, right? So he thought we talk ourselves out of the truth a lot of the time, right? So and the way we do that is to put off a decision. When he says you need to do the right thing as soon as you know what's right, I say, immediately, not put it off. And I think that's an important psychological insight on his part. Trying to think of anything other oh yeah, so uh, another important idea on his part is and this relates to the procrastination issue. He asserts that emphasizes the importance of this personal of what it means of individual understanding what it means that he or she is mortal, and an awareness of death. You have to be able to think your own death while you're alive, and he thinks that by doing this, as he puts it, when you're really aware that the thief could be on the roof, that you could be called anytime. He thinks that that will increase the value of time, such that you'll recognize I can't be careless here. Uh, I've got to do the right thing or whatever. That you won't put things off because you recognize that any moment you could be gone, right? And I had that experience with I had a rift in the family with my brother over the care of my mother, and my brother and I didn't talk for 9 years, even though he was not only my brother in flesh and blood, but a soul brother, man. We were very, very close. He's my older brother. 9 years we went without talking, and that's just spiritually wasteful. Kierkegaard would say, "What did you think you were going to live for? We're going to live forever, right?" So it should. He thinks the awareness of death should make us take more care, take more seriously, and not in a somber sense, but in our what's going on in life that stop us from procrastinating. I should have gone somehow and just forced my brother and I to come to some reconciliation. But no, I said, okay, you don't want to talk? We won't talk. 9 years. So it was just terrible. And he died a couple of years ago, and they were such wasted years, and we were so close. So I think so. This awareness of death and its relation to procrastination is, I think, an important insight. I think I'll stop there because that's quite a. So okay, so we talked about it, the meaning of faith, anxiety, depression versus despair. There's depression is a feeling, despair an activity, and we talked about the problem of the obsession with comparison and appropriation. Talk about what it means to appropriate something. Do you really make it your own? Ask yourself, do I really believe what I'm saying? And we got the issue of thinking carefully, thinking about making yourself co-present with the idea of your own death, a profound awareness of your mortality. And so those are some of his transferable greatest hits, I think. Any questions I can answer?
It should automatically go to your face if you ask a question. So just say it loud and he'll hear it.
For the folks that kind of came in late, could you kind of do the intro again? Like who this book, who the author was that you're talking about?
Okay.
I can do that at the end, Gordon. Don't worry about that. I'll rehash that. Yeah. Just so you
Okay.
do. Yeah. Yeah. Who's gonna go first?
Oh, this is worse than my intro class. Come on, speak up. You must have some questions. He's challenging this guy.
I don't really know what to ask. I mean, there's so much stuff to think about you've given us.
I got you. Yeah, it's true.
Question yet?
Gordon, I have one for you. Would you mind talking about the story of you finding Kierkegaard when you were young? You know which one?
Yeah. I was going through it.
Yeah.
He certainly helped save my life. I was my early 20s. I was married to a woman in New York. I was a heroin addict, and she, after a few years, decided to go back on heroin and leave, and I basically cracked up for a couple of years. I mean, people thought I was a goner, and one day I was in a bookstore, and I was at a coffee shop bookstore, and waiting for a psychiatric appointment, and it was a coffee shop used bookstore, and I saw this book with a blue binding. It was Kierkegaard, and I picked it up and shoplifted it. And so and it got me to take faith seriously again, or at least again, in part by acknowledging the difficulty of it, right? Not sugarcoating it, saying this is from an objective point of view, this stuff is really hard to believe. It conflicts with reason. And I started to read him, and that was very helpful in getting me back to life. And yeah, again, and also there's certainly a theme in him that as in Dostoevsky, that suffering is is something you can really grow out of, not as, it's not a stench. When you're really in a really bad place, it feels like anxiety and depression society, feels like you have an odor or something, and not to think of it, not to think of that as a in those terms, that it's something you can grow from. That was helpful to me.
I have a question. Starting out with an observation, you had mentioned making something your own.
Right.
That's always been important to me for a long, long time in my life. I don't know where it came from. But it seems to me, if I can see something and I maybe like it, I'll take it and try it on. And if I try it on and like it, then I'll make it my own. And when I make it my own, it becomes more important to me. It's something I can hold on to because it's my own now. Can you speak to that? Because as I say, I don't know where this came from. I like, I have it.
Yeah, that's an interesting way of thinking about appropriation. So it's as though when you hear an idea, say, uh, you try the idea on, try to see the world through that idea and see if it fits. If that's how I'm understanding it. And that sounds like a very interesting, very rich idea of appropriation, right? But you have to try to live by our ideals, like the things we espouse. And Kierkegaard didn't think many people did that, right?
Thank you.
One of the things too that Kierkegaard talks about is especially in the earlier works where he's doing more aesthetic and ethical work, is all these people who are just trying on these different selves, but they don't cost anything. They're just they're just all this, I might have heard like being this person and this person and this person, but one of the earliest distinctions he makes is like, well, if you choose to live ethically, you've committed yourself to something. You're like, I'm going to work at being this. And then you elevate all these into different higher understandings.
That's right. You got a good scholar, Kierkegaard scholar there, right in your room. Yeah, and that score, I'm glad Seth reminded me. He believed that there were basically three stages of consciousness in life. And the first is the aesthetic, and for the aesthetic individual who looks at the aesthetic individual, the aesthetic individual, the good is the interesting and the bad is the boring, right? That's their ultimate categories of their criteria. Then the other stage is the ethical, where it's good. There's the contrast between good and evil, and finally there's the viewpoint of faith, which is between a religious viewpoint, which is the dichotomy is between faith and sin, right? So it's as though each of those standpoints, and it's as though you see the world through a certain criteria, right? So for the aesthetic, it's the criterion of something is whether it's interesting or boring, right? So it's not unlike what the last fellow was saying about trying an idea on, but it's as though with each of these basic views of life, there's different categories that are that rule your life.
Gordon, I'll let you go because I give you a promise to keep it to a certain time, and we also got to get them out and talk about next week. But thank you so much for
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Israel.
And if you have any questions or comments, my email is marino@stoloff.edu, and feel free to contact me. And Seth has it. And thanks for having me, Seth, and appreciate you sharing the morning with me. Thanks very
good
much.
to see you, Gordon.
Bye-bye.
Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think your comment on cost was valid,
Mhm.
like extremely valid, when he talked about his first year students or his intro students. That happens a lot with college, a lot of times. Young people who go to college without having to pay a cost.
Mhm.
Like it's just expected, or daddy's paying for it or whatever. And I don't, daddy could be the government, I don't know.
Yep.
Until you've actually paid a price
Mhm.
or are prepared to pay a price for something in life, whatever that thing is, knowledge, experience, whatever. There's no value to that thing. If someone just gives you something and you take it, oh, great, thank you, this is nice.
Mm.
But there's no cost associated with it, so why should you value that?
Yeah.
I think that's a very valid way of looking at it.
Well, I have no idea what you're talking about, because I got a full ride to school and promptly flunked out in 1 year, so. There's that. So,
There's no value.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah.
like, okay.
Yeah.
But then people who go back to college, and I'm using college as an analogy, perhaps that's not the right word. When people tend to go back later on, they're adults. Well, now they have a working life, they have children, they have whatever, and there's an extreme cost to that in terms of time, money, commitment, whatever. They tend to do very, very well because they now value that thing.
Mhm.
And again, it's not just in education, it's anything in
Yeah.
life.
Well, going forward, what we'll do in the next 9 weeks, and thanks for being willing to let him do that. I just thought he'd be a lot better off than me doing the introduction.
I missed the intro, I don't know who that man was.
Sorry, I apologize.
He was very wise.
That is Gordon Reno. He is the head of the International Kierkegaard Library. Is the former head. He retired. His wife has Parkinson's and he's full-time caregiver now. But it's at St. Olaf in Minnesota.
Oh, okay, I don't know if he was.
If you're Golden Girls fans, you know St. Olaf.
Oh, yeah.
But he's the head of the research library there, and also probably one of, if not the world's leading scholars on Kierkegaard in English. He's a internationally known scholar.
Okay.
And I did 2 fellowships there at the library and got to know him quite well, and became a good friend as well. He's also, if you're boxing people, he's also like best friends with Mike Tyson and is an internationally known boxing columnist and coach. So
There you go.
he's a man of many talents. But
And then, so the book or you keep saying Gorson, right?
Kierkegaard, so that's a compromise between English and Danish. Like if you looked at his name, you'd say Kierkegaard. But at the library, we have students from all over and people who actually can pronounce his name. It's actually more like Kierkegaard, like you kind of swallow all your vowels. People in Europe joke that Danish is German with potato in your mouth, which is kind of accurate. But they mock the Danish for their language quite a bit. But when I say Kierkegaard, it's just me giving the Europeans and
As a
Americans a
person.
nod each.
A person with Danish background.
Me as
Yeah.
well.
I never heard it spoke. Did you, Diana?
No.
We have both my mom's parents came from Denmark.
Mhm.
But the only Danish word I ever heard my mom say was the word for dish rag, and I can't even.
I don't know that one. I know a lot of Danish words I do not know the one. Yeah, but what we'll do, and I think I said this in the original announcement, I'll keep it self-contained. Like if you miss one, you're not gonna, have no idea what's going on. But there will be some building elements. Everything will be, it's all recorded. It'll be on a Zoom link. I'm gonna get, I got a piece of paper somewhere. I'm gonna have you guys give me all your email addresses. And that way I can send out stuff during the week. But what we'll probably do is I'll teach for about 20 or 30 minutes. And then we'll just open it up for discussion. I'll have, starting next week, there'll be a handout for homework for home. Like if you want to read more, you can, but if you don't read it, you're not gonna not have any idea what's going on. But it'll give you an ability to kind of think about what's gonna happen in the next one. And we'll kind of go topically. We're gonna spend some time talking about faith. So a lot of what he talked about, some time talking about communication, and a lot of the things that Kierkegaard did. And the focus on it will be, because this is Kierkegaard's focus all the time, focus will be just taking what we learn and making it a part of who we are. Kierkegaard he's referred to as the father of existentialism. And when we say that, a lot of people are like, oh, gross. The existentialists, the French existentialists are all atheists, and which is right, but all they did is they took Kierkegaard, stole his stuff, and ripped God out. So you end up with, something that is quite depressing instead of something that is actually able to lift you out of your despair. But Kierkegaard has a famous quote, or one of my favorite quotes of his is that you only know insofar as you become, and you only become insofar as you know. So there's a cyclical relationship between your knowledge that's in your head and the type of person that you actually are. And so, I can learn a lot about what love is from Kierkegaard, but until I go and try and do it, then I don't really know what I know in my head yet. And also the things that I become also need to have good information that are put into them, just to really use it as a very two sides of the same coin. And you really can't have a one-sided coin. But so, well, yeah, we'll just focus on learning some about what he wants us to do and doing it. Yeah.
What era did Kierkegaard live in?
So he was born in 1813, and he died in 1855. He lived. He made a few trips to Berlin, but other than that, he pretty much lived his entire life in Copenhagen. He was very much a provincial person, very well known. He was well known in his lifetime. First for being brilliant and literary, and second, and towards the end of his life, he went a little crazy. Like got very angry with the church. But the reason that I find Kierkegaard, and I'll conclude with this because I wanna, well, we got a little time. The reason I find him so important today is that the situation that he was speaking into in Denmark is similar to what we have, I think, in America, which is that you can be a Christian in name. Gordon alluded to this, but he has a famous quote where he says, only in Denmark can a man be born and reborn at the same time. Like you get your birth certificate and you get your baptismal certificate, and now you're a Christian. And he was utterly, the entire bent of his life is repudiating that completely. Like, just no, you're a Christian if you love God, yourself, and neighbor correctly. You're a Christian if you are trying to do those things. It's not a matter of judgment. It's a matter of what is the moral vector of your life. Do you have force and a direction in your moral life? Are you trying to become more like Christ, or are you not? Because if you are trying to be more like Christ, you're Christian. If you're not, then you're not. But it has nothing to do with your birth, your family upbringing, your situation in life, success, your lack of success, your high noble blood, your peasant. It doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is, for him, is are you actively bending your life towards what he calls the prototype, Christ. So
Is that similar to saying, like, somebody says, like, what's the word, I'm reborn or something like that, but there's some denominations that put more emphasis on like, making a decision as an adult. I forget what that term is.
yeah,
Born again.
Born again,
Born
there
again.
you go, yeah.
yeah, that's his direct quote. Only, I said reborn, but only in Denmark can a man be born and born again at the same time. It's his joke. Like, but yeah, this is a ludicrous concept to him. But it doesn't really have to do with him. He's a Lutheran. They do infant baptisms. But what he's trying to tell you is that you have to follow up on that. You don't just get this gift of I'm a Christian. It's not for him, it's not a label. It's not a tag. It's absolutely something that you are in the core of your being. And for him, who, as Gordon alluded to, goes into all these different nuances of what it is to be a human, to be but he has a famous sentence at the start of the book, Sickness Unto Death, which is his great work on treatise on sin. Let's see if I can do this from memory. When I taught my class, I used to put the sentence on the board, and I would say, I promise you that by the end of the semester, you'll understand the sentence, because it sounds ludicrous. But the self is a relationship that relates itself to itself and to the other, and in itself and in its relating itself to itself relates itself to God and rests transparently in the hand that created it. So it's a bit of a mouthful, but
You write that down.
yeah, but
After 9 weeks.
yeah, in 9 weeks, I guarantee you could understand. But the point he's trying to make in there is that there are all sorts of different relationalities that are in us. I think about myself. I think about my family, I think about my friends, and I find out who I am from thinking about myself, from my family telling me who I am, from my friends telling me who I am, from my enemies telling me who I am, and from God telling me who I am. And so for him, all of those different relationalities are parts of ourself that we need to be conscious of and working on. And so we'll kind of pick apart different parts of that in ways that, yeah.
I guess I'm feeling a little guilty right now.
Mm.
When I was listening to the professor and he was talking about that, like despair and depression and agony and all that stuff. Does any of you ever have a song pop in your head? And you just can't seem to get it out of your thought?
Never.
It's not a Rolling Stones song.
No, actually, it's from Hee Haw. Remember that song?
Yeah.
Gloom, despair, agony, deep dark depression, excessive misery. If it weren't for bad luck, I have no luck at all. Gloom, despair. Sorry.
Yeah, it's all right. There's nothing wrong with that.
I have one other question.
Yep.
So is he, I already won't say his name right, so, but was he a preacher in the Lutheran church, or was he a philosopher who attended the Lutheran church, or?
He was, so he had his magister's degree, which is the highest, it's higher than an MDiv at the time. But he very often thought, he actually concluded his 2 authorships. He kind of took a break, and he thought very much about taking a pastorship and then did not. And then at the end of his life, towards the end of his life, was probably about to take a pastorship, and then he died at age, what, 42?
45.
Yeah.
Based on the dates, I think it's 45 based on.
I think it's 42, it's 1813 to 1855, so I think it's 40, so, okay. But very young, he actually did not think he was gonna live past 33, Christ's age, because a lot of his, we don't even know that, we were dreaming, and his brother died at the same time, but he was just a writer. His family was wealthy. He lived off an inheritance and wrote a lot, but I mean, when I say wrote a lot, he wrote somewhere between 40 to 50,000 pages in about 12 years. Most people think it's what he burned the candle at both ends and burned out. That's probably why he got so sick and collapsed and died. But we have a great volume of work that is certainly helped a lot of people.
So with that many pages, how did you choose this particular, I think we're gonna go through.
We're not gonna go through one word.
Oh,
I'm gonna,
okay.
yeah, we'll probably, knowing me, we'll probably go a lot from works of love. My first fellowship, I spent going and reading all of his works. I read all of his work in a summer. And there obviously were parts that I loved, and there were parts that I was like, I never want to read that again. You're not gonna love every single page, but yeah, Works of Love is one that had a profound effect on me. Specifically because it made, and it's when I was probably 26, 25, 26, around there. When you're that age, it made love of neighbor and love of self and love of God. It made them have some unity. Like I recognized that by not loving myself properly, I was not loving the neighbor properly.
Yeah.
You can't love the neighbor as yourself if you're not loving yourself. And since love of neighbor is to love your neighbor is to love God, then if I'm not loving myself, I'm not loving God. If I'm not loving mine, and it gave me a lot of unity in that. But it also, Kierkegaard makes it stringent. He says one must make the requirement as stringent as it actually is, so that one can then understand what it is like to fail and what it is like to be told that you are not a failure. And he also says this is Christianity: infinite humiliation, then love, and then a striving born of gratitude. So you have this understanding that, hey, this is really hard. But he says, if you don't get to that recognition, this is really hard to do. This is going to wreck your moods. sometimes. This is going to make you feel like crap sometimes. This is going to make you feel like you don't have any worth sometimes. But if you don't do that work, then you can't get the part that comes after, which is the unbelievable gratitude of experiencing grace in all of those strivings and actually experiencing God telling you that the striving is what I care about. And your worth is not based on how well you achieve that, but you have to do that hard stuff to get to that point. You have a question, Garrett?
I just wanted to find out what your educational background is.
That was my question. Who is Seth? Because you mentioned
I
a
know.
number of things.
Oh, yeah.
but I don't know.
Well, what do you mean by my education?
Your college,
Oh,
you said you taught.
I went to Illinois College my freshman year and flunked out, so that was
What
2000. Illinois College, small, tiny liberal arts college.
Literally called Illinois.
Illinois College, it's the oldest
What
college,
what city?
Jacksonville, Illinois. It's the first college. William Jennings Bryan founded it. So, yeah, we had a picture of WJB that hung crooked in our frat hall. But after that, I went like 6 years to the community college. It took like a class at a time because I had to pay for it. And did not have a lot of money, but got into philosophy, and I got into philosophy because I was essentially an atheist. Like I grew up in the Reformed Church. Didn't like that.
Yeah.
After high school. And I had seen a lot of my friends leave the church because the church hurt them. And I didn't blame them for that, but I didn't think it was, it's fine to say I don't want to be around Christians because they hurt me. But in my mind, it wasn't fine to say that means that Jesus Christ isn't the Son of God because,
Well, that'd be me. I
Yeah.
mean, I measure my life nowadays as AC/BC. BC is before zero and
gotcha.
AC is after. I can relate to what you were just saying there. I grew up in the Christian Reformed Church. And I tell you, as soon as I was able, I was done. And I really never picked my faith back up in earnest until I met Carol.
Well, good for her.
Yeah, she did something.
No, I wanted to leave my faith with intellectual integrity. I wanted to leave, and I had left it, but I wanted to be able to say, okay, well, I have better answers and truer answers and more intellectually supported answers than the church has. And so I got into philosophy, and I basically read the whole history of philosophy from Plato to Heidegger. And at the end of it, was like, shit. Like I think this is right. Like, so most people's story, like coming back to faith, is like, trumpets and God save me, and mine was like, oh. Like, I think that this nonsense is nonsense, and that means I've got to do some things. And I called myself a theist for like a year. I didn't go to church because I was just so bummed about it. But obviously that's not where I'm at now. But after I came to that, refound faith, I started looking at colleges, and I'll keep this brief again. I looking at college. I was enrolled at Truman State, which has got a really, really good philosophy of religion program in Missouri. And about 3 weeks before I was going to start classes, I did enrolled, but I went to a conference and met the dean of Lincoln Christian University, the dean of students, and he told me that he's got a professor that's coming in who's an amazing, amazing. He started up a philosophy program, great guy. I'm gonna curse one more time, I'm sorry, but I looked at him and I told him, I'm not going to your shitty school, your shitty Christian school in the cornfields.
Any cornfields?
And which Brian has never let me live down, because that's exactly where I went, because I met Chris and within 5 minutes was like, I'm studying with this guy. I got very lucky. So he he's now an Anglican priest in Texas. But he was my undergrad, and then for some of my masters that I did not finish, my master's advisor as well, so did philosophy of religion there. Left just because I was down on funds and also just down on academia and the way it was going, and just didn't really want to be a teacher. I didn't want to be a tenure track. After that, did teaching and bartending.
I'd like to introduce you to our oldest son.
Okay.
The reason being, he was a chemistry major and the cute girls all went to philosophy classes. So he has a degree in philosophy and creative writing. He went to Texas to live for a while and he ended up at Wright University, 1 year short of being a pastor. He now sells insurance, but his final paper for philosophy, he says, "Mom, will you read this?" Well, I read it, and I says, "Justin, this is way above my head." And he goes, "Yeah, I know, that's what I was going for." So, I'm gonna ask him if he won't, like to do the Zoom stuff,
Yeah.
That's all right with
Yep,
you?
and I didn't know it this time, but I'll get everybody's email address, and I'll send out like all them, like where the Zoom link is gonna be and all that kind of stuff. I didn't.
Now, do you know everybody? Do you?
No, I'm actually going to, I thought Michael was bringing them, but we are gonna
Here's a
do,
Piece of paper. if you want
okay.
to Write, if everybody wants to write their
I'll just.
information down.
Send it around with it. Yeah.
I have a bigger one for that.
Oh, that works. Yeah, just pass it around with, just name and email address. What was the question? Somebody asked.
No, I just gonna try to hook you and my son up.
Oh, the name, yeah, Michael was going to bring name tags, we'll do name tags going forward, because I want to get to know everything. I am comically horrible with names. I guarantee you there are at least 5 people in here that think I know their names and I don't. It's really bad.
I know you know my.
You would think, that's true. You think as a bartender I'd be good at it, but nope. Yeah, I'm terrible with it. It's just in one ear, out the other.
Just give us all nicknames.
Yep,
There you go.
yeah, I'll forget those two. It sounds like a joke, but it's, yeah, and once they're in, they're good, but. Yeah, and also, my brain just does this thing, I'm not non-neurotypical, I have a weird, like brainwave disorder that it basically presents as ADHD with some other weird quirks. But, yeah, my brain will also sometimes get two people confused, and that's the way it is forever. Like, my sister's best friend has 2 sisters, and to this day, I've known them for 38 years. To this day, when one of them shows up, I'm like, oh, crap. Is it Emily or is it Melissa? I cannot remember. And I've spent 300 hours. It doesn't matter. My brain's just like, no, we're never gonna get those.
No, yours.
Yeah. But anybody else have any questions?
Was he saying something about fellow or fellowship or something like
Yeah.
that? So how does that play in with you? So I think he was referencing you, right?
Yeah, no, that's how I know Gordon. Yeah, so the research library does something which is really, really cool. They do summer graduate fellowships, and so the school itself has a bunch of houses along the main street going up to the hill. The campus is on a big hill. It's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful school. But they're all international houses, so like if you're in French or German or all these languages, they live there during the year, but in summer they're empty. They put you up in the house if you get one of these fellowships, and you have access to the library from 9 to 5, 6 o'clock when it closes, and then they give you a living stipend, and you owe them nothing. It is just you can whatever you want to do. And if you wanted to go up there and play tennis the entire time, you could. You're not going to get enough fellowship, but you don't have to do anything. But take part in what the library has, and the library has a copy or numerous copies of every work of Kierkegaard's in every language that's been translated into. It has a copy of every book that was in Kierkegaard's library and that we know he was influenced by, and then it has a copy of every book in every language that has more than 2 pages of Kierkegaard. So it is a massive reason. I mean, it's larger and more, I would say more important than the Kierkegaard Research Center in Copenhagen, Denmark. So yeah, Howard and Edna Hong, who did the second huge scholarly translation of his work. Howard was an incredible translator and also one of the best networkers with rich people that Minnesota's ever seen. And he just got them to give all their money to the library. And he did quite a bit of stuff with it. So because of that, they have an endowment. They give those fellowships out of the endowment. So it was an amazing 2 summers, meeting a lot of people from, I lived with people from Korea and Chile and Germany and Norway. I mean, just all over.
So you taught about this too?
When I was doing my master's work, I taught a couple classes. I taught ancient medieval philosophy, and then I taught a class on Kierkegaard. Just one of those 2 every other semester. Oh, and medieval philosophy.
Just a curiosity, but Gordon talked about being estranged from his brother, and then his brother passed away. Did he reconcile?
Yes. Yeah. 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 Gordon is a very open person. He's a professor, but I think he's changed a lot more lives with who he is than what he's taught. He's a good dude. Yeah.
It seems like the 1800s were filled with these philosophers and pastors and folks who would write at post-secondary level education wise, this and that, and like Chesterton or Charles, or not Charles Russell. There's just seems like there's so many of these folks, and almost consistently they seem to have had very dysfunctional personal lives. And is this gentleman similar along that path as far as, like, was he married? Did he have kids?
Nope, not married, no kids. He is very famously not married. He had an engagement that he broke off because it's not bad. It's just a bunch of Kierkegaard scholars that not terribly important about why he did it. But no, I wouldn't say that he was
dysfunctional.
No, I mean, he's certainly not the most functional person ever, but he is also ludicrously brilliant. And I think that is its own dysfunction. It is very difficult to be that intelligent and relate to. Yeah. Put it this way, most of the geniuses that I've met have not been the most normal. I've met a few. I think the only normal genius I know is my buddy Ying, and he's doing nuclear engineering, so he better be normal. But yeah, and no, he wasn't a catastrophe, but he was not somebody that you would think of as the most normal. But I mean, he was by most accounts kind and generous. So not a perfect dude in any way, shape, or form. I'm not gonna. There's times where I read Kierkegaard, I'm just like, what the heck, dude? Come on. But
how'd it go off the rocker later?
Essentially one of the most important ministers in Denmark, whose name is Minster, basically caved to the government on some policies that basically turned the church into everything that he detested in faith, and just basically turned the church into a government apparatus. And so he wrote a series of pamphlets called The Moment, and it's the very last book we have of his. Just all those combined is called Attack on Christendom. And basically the idea that he said only only in Christendom would a man dare to defend Christianity. Essentially, what he's saying is they've just made it so cheap that, they're real vicious. They're not kind, and he's clearly very angry. And he dies a year later. And most people think that he's physically dissenting in that year, or that they're related. But he was clearly pretty ticked off because they're not fun to read. in most of his work and almost all of his work, he does have some very polemical moments, but in most of his work, he's kind and generous and, you know, he may make fun of something, but he'll also not spend any time making fun of people or, you know, he's very rigorous, but those are just, the later stuff is just kind of mean spirited. It's unfortunate, but the last year of your life does not determine your value as a thinker or a person. It would have been nice if he finished a little better though. I used to joke in my medieval class that I wish that Augustine had died just 1 year earlier, so that we don't have some of the stuff it worked out into Christian history, and some of the problems that we get from his readings in Romans, but the same thing with Kierkegaard, you know, we didn't really need that last year. But I'm sure that his, you know, family's glad they had it. Anybody else?
So, are you gonna have us do some reading from some of these books?
Yeah, so I will have, starting next week, I'll have a take home for the next week. There'll be some reading, like for the next week. You don't have to do it. You'll be fine if you don't. Like, I'm not gonna pressure anybody, but if you want to get more out of it, I'll have it. It'll be if I have like a, I don't know, 5 to 10 page reading. It won't be tons. Yeah. But I'll have handouts at the end of every week for the next one. Yeah.
Would it make sense just to put that on the computer and email and?
If I can do that, yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, I'll
just
talk
to
to
save
Lisa.
paper.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
That clock is 11 minutes.
Yep.
Oh,
Yeah.
good to know.
Yeah, I was about to say, it's that time and we got it.
Very
All right, thanks a lot, guys.
Well, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
it's
you.
fun.
Put a couple more names on there.
Yep.
People who are
Yep,
here.
definitely.
You go. But-
There you go.
Well, I'll make sure.
You're done.
No, no, go ahead and do it. I have.
She's sitting in the
Go sit
back.
there.
Oh, you didn't make it to church.
Oh. Kindergarten.